Hey guys, Ben Nash from Pivot here, and pumped to be here today with David McDermott. Dave's a business and executive coach at McDermott Coaching. Basically, works with business owners that are in the growth phase, as well as executives that work for larger organizations. I'm keen to hear from David. Some of the trends that he's seeing, challenges, and how people can overcome them. Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks very much, Ben. Great to be here.
Look, I thought a good place to start would be just to obviously you're seeing inside a lot of businesses, both small and large. What are some of the trends that you're seeing out there at the moment?
So, definitely stress and overwhelm is pretty common in with organizational leaders, whether they're executives of big organizations or business owners. All my clients have always been busy and are very busy people. That never changes. Some manage it better than others, but I do see, and I've been doing this now for 20 years in terms of coaching and consulting to business owners and organizations and executives, that there seems to be more distractions than ever before. And I think the rise of technology and digital, social media, etc., is a big part of that. Emails and the endless demands on us that all the upgrades in technology provide, both useful and not useful. That's absolutely something I've seen as a trend. And as a leader, that when I work with clients in terms of leadership, you need to have boundaries around that. And that's that is something that I always recommend, so that you're not sucked into the endless distractions and never get round to the real creative project work that you need to be doing to actually get stuff done as a leader. Meetings seem to be more part of people's experience than ever. And I always say, meet for a purpose, not just for the sake of meeting. And I think that one of the mistakes and one of the trends that has occurred is meetings for the sake of meeting, the recurring meeting for this or that, rather than meeting when you need to meet. That's another trend I've seen increasing. And probably more high level is people really reflecting and getting clear on why they're doing what they're doing, both at an individual and an organizational level. I think for a long time, people got a job, organizations ran. They were clear, as Simon Sinek says, he certainly champions this notion, and it's something which is, when you really take a good look, a no-brainer. People and organizations, I think for a long time, have been clear about what they do and how they do it, but not clear about why they do it. And I think this is changing. I think more and more, a lot of good work being done in the world of leadership. And Simon Sinek is only one of many. It's something I take a strong stand for in the work I do and the projects I'm involved with as well. Helping organizations and individuals to take the time to stop and go back to ask the question, why am I doing what I am doing? And for organizations to ask, why do we exist? What is the reason that our marketplace should let us exist? And that is the area of organizational purpose as well as individual purpose. And I see that this is becoming more and more a live and living question, where active work is being done by many organizations and individuals. And that, to me, is a super positive trend. And I see it will continue to the point where you'll find the more common experience is that people and organizations are starting with the why, then moving to what do we do, and then looking at how we do it, which I think is the natural and healthy way to operate.
Look, I think one good upshot of the COVID disruption from a business perspective has been that most businesses have realized the importance of their teams and supporting their teams in the right way and getting the most out of them. And I know that I've been on that journey at Pivot in our business, and a big part of it, especially when people are working hard, you got growing businesses that doing the work is good, and some people are naturally motivated by learning or achieving targets and financial rewards, but they're probably getting to the point where people need that to have that purpose that they can get
Yes,
behind. And I've found for us it's been super effective in saying, okay, this is why we exist, and then people can get behind that more and give them another sense of why they're doing what they're doing, as opposed to just because it's their job or because
exactly.
they really enjoy it. But I'm keen to pick up on one of the things that you said there around distraction, and I would completely agree. I was reading this great book or listening to the audio book recently called Stolen Focus.
Mm,
All talking about like the technology and just society and how we are just constantly distracted, that it goes
mm,
through some pretty alarming statistics about we're reading less books, we're less consuming less like long form content, and we're just constantly searching for the dopamine hit of the social media scroll or whatever the thing is. And it was super interesting. I have heard a few things like that, but it's definitely the best book that I've read in
okay.
some time. I'm interested in, you mentioned that as your first thing, but
Mm,
I know that everybody's individual, but how do you tackle that for you? How do you make sure that you're keeping your focus and
mm.
maintaining the time for the things that are really important for you?
Well, it's a great question, and I haven't read the book that you just talked about, but one of the main books that I really loved around certainly having stronger boundaries around digital distractions was Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, and I I've probably more than most would engage less than the average person with social media and scrolling and all that sort of thing. I find I just feel like I'm not spending my time as usefully as I can if I'm spending a lot of time on social media. So that's a pretty strong one for me. I don't have the Facebook or Instagram accounts on my phone, the apps rather. I do have accounts, but I don't have the apps. And I just log on through my desktop if I really need to pop something up there. Like if I'm got a podcast episode that's gone live, and I'll just pop it on the different platforms. But then I leave, and I find that's definitely something which really works for me, because I just personally have not found the value in the news feeds and scrolling up and down to see different interesting things. I prefer to spend my time on other things, all the many other things I'm really enjoy doing. I and I offer this to my clients when I work with them. There's a system I work with, which is a time prioritization system. And this really started to become much more important for me. I mean, it was before family, but when I had a child, and there was increasing demands on my time, I really, really, more than ever, needed to prioritize my time in terms of my business life and then personal life. And I do have systems, prioritization systems, having tried a whole bunch, and refined and customized, just like money management, which is, of course, the topic of your podcast. I find that, you need to find the right systems that work for you. So I tried a bunch. I blended certain time prioritization systems, and I customized something that works for me. And nothing's set in stone. I'm always refining it, and sometimes I get knocked off, but I keep coming back to balance. And I have a system that I just stick to, that involves doing tasks in front of me, deferring ones that are not for today, delegating ones I shouldn't be doing, and deleting ones that um, I just keep getting deferred and deferred, that are obviously not ever going to get attention. And there are other aspects to the system, but that's kind of the basic model. So I use a system that makes sense to me and works.
I think it's a lot like, money is one of these things that being successful with money is about building good habits and behaviors with your money.
Yes.
Being successful in business is the same. It's about building good behaviors with, what you focus on, how you go about doing that. what you do day in
Absolutely.
and day out. And I think for us individually in our own like lives and focus and careers and jobs and businesses and money, it's the same thing. I say in our talks about money that good financial planning is good prioritization, and everyone's priorities are different, but it's so easy. And I think to that distraction point, that in the moment you're always prioritizing every time you're acting or you're working or you're not working or whatever, you're prioritizing something. But when we're
Yeah.
prioritizing the moment, we often prioritize things that are different to what, if you say like what is really important to you and you're looking at that 50,000 foot level, you say these things are important to me, but in the moment you want the dopamine hit, so you go and check your emails and respond to a few things, even though that's
Exactly.
just going to mean more emails come in, and it's probably not
That's
helping you
right.
achieve your career goals or finish that important project that you need to do or thing that you need to ship.
Exactly.
So it's easy to do, but I think like anything, you need to, like money, like business, like your focus, you need a starting point. You're not going to get it right at the start, but then you can go, well, this
Yeah.
works for me, this didn't work so well, and then I'll build
Yeah.
on it from there.
Probably just one more thing to add, Ben,
Yeah.
that I probably might be even more important than that do, defer, delegate, delete framework I just mentioned. And this came from a mentor of mine, and I've really always had it in my life. Haven't always stuck to it, but always had it as a principle, is to set aside large chunks of time for focused work. And I think this is number one to really get stuff done and to enjoy your life in terms of your work life and personal life. There will be all the endless little stuff that you need to attend to, but I find making the number one focus the big long chunks of uninterrupted time where you get real work done makes all the difference. Then set aside half an hour to do all the little things and send those emails, check emails, but not at the cost of the large chunks of focused time. And for me, in my business, that's coaching clients, and also working on projects. Like I have a podcast that is about to launch, and another. If I'm launching a program, I lock myself away and I focus, and I don't take calls. I put the phone on silent. I close down the email, and my family knows. If I'm focused, I'm just there for a certain time, and then I can take that hat off and go and run around doing millions of things. But I know that I've had the focus time where I've been super productive.
Interestingly, in this Stolen Focus book that I was listening to, that they talk about the fact that the more you do have that deep focus time, the easier it is to do that. And on the flip side, the less you do it,
Yes,
the harder it is to find that focus. So he was
exactly.
he was big on that find your flow, the deep work type stuff. And the more you build that muscle, the easier it then comes. But he was saying that for him, it took a while to actually find that, because he was in this state of constant distraction. So
Yes.
yeah, pretty interesting how our body sort of adapts and reacts to what we feed it, I suppose, in a lot of ways. Dave, what would you say? What are the biggest challenges? And you mentioned a couple of things already, but what are the biggest challenges for business owners and executives as you see it?
Well, there are many, and I think the list would probably be endless if you tried to brainstorm a list. But I do find there are some recurring themes which I find myself coaching all my clients around these, some more than others, but most commonly. And two of them are how to have uncomfortable conversations, as the solution, but that's the solution to the problem of avoiding uncomfortable conversations that need to be had in order to move forward. And I
Mm,
see a lot of leaders, and it's not just leaders. It can be at all levels of the organization, avoiding genuine conversations that, if they were to take place in a healthy and assertive way with respect for both parties, would address an issue that perhaps has been long standing in the organization and causing a lot of unnecessary suffering, sorting it out, and then creating a solution for moving forward. And this I find is one of the biggest things that I spend my time talking to leaders about. And when problems come up, not always, but certainly more the majority of the time, there's a conversation that they need to have with one or a number of people where it might be a bit uncomfortable, it might be very uncomfortable, but provided that it's done with clarity and that the questions are very, very healthy and reasonable, and that the approach and principles used, are good ones, that are proven to be effective around conflict management and forward moving, the outcomes are excellent. Also, that sometimes if the people who are, possibly at the core of the issue, are really just simply not going to be up for a healthy relationship. Having those uncomfortable conversations is a filter for getting clear with those people that this organisation is not a good fit, and then helping them to find an organisation that is a better fit. But in the majority of cases, I've found having the uncomfortable conversations leads to resolving long-standing problems, short or long-standing problems, and then getting on with the stuff that you should be doing and enjoying it. So that would be one. And there are countless examples that I could talk about. Just to pick one, one of my clients had, and I won't name the business for confidentiality, but has a team member who sort of is up and down in terms of not just performance but their mood, and when they're in a low mood, it's a pretty strong low mood that in my client's view really affects everyone else in the team, and that was a classic opportunity for my client to move into a coaching style or an uncomfortable conversation with that team member, being frank about their view of how that low mood affects everyone else, and asking them, what's the solution here? How can we ensure that everyone else gets to perform and enjoy their experience at work as they wish to, as well as, of course, meeting your needs, which is a great starting point to get into a crunchy and sometimes uncomfortable conversation that at the end of it is actually very fruitful, and where everyone feels good that they got to the core of something that had been bottled up and has now been addressed. So that would be one of the top ones. And probably if I just pick a number two, it would be creating agreements, again, as a solution, but creating agreements as a solution to the problem of people having different expectations for an outcome that they haven't communicated to each other, that stays stuck in their head. And I see that this also, and it's sort of linked with the the having uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
But it is its own topic. A lot of the issues in organisations that I see occur when one party has an idea in their head and another party has an idea in their head, and they're not aligned, but they're neither are they communicated, and the two parties come to communicate with different ideas in their head and end up frustrated and unable to understand each other because they're not communicating their expectation. And what I've found a good solution is to, and using the language of this, is to create an agreement together. And I always coach my client to ask, what's the agreement I would like to create with you is, or what's an agreement that we can create together that's going to be satisfactory to both of us? And starting there and then having the conversation that comes out of that. And one of the articles on my website is expectations are toxic, agreements are powerful. And that's the principle I've found is pretty valid throughout all organizations of all sorts in the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, whether it's not like necessarily a major problem in a business, but when you get to an outcome for, it could even be a project or a task or something that you're working on, it almost always comes down to that mismatch of expectations. So
Exactly.
I like the agreement though thing on the personal level. What we try to do from a project perspective is set those expectations by saying, okay, let's clearly define what the outcome is that we're looking for, or what the
Yes.
definition of done is in this thing, which helps. But I like that. I like the agreement piece. I might have to
Yes.
run with that.
Exactly. And you talked about outcomes. That's, if I was going to pick a third, probably, in the top three is, in any project, in any conversation of significance, be clear about the outcomes that you want from a project, from a conversation of significance. And usually I suggest it's best for you to write it down. And if it's a team kind of environment, communicate the outcomes at the start that you're working towards. Then everyone knows, and you can get buy-in on the outcomes. Is that okay? Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add or ask about those? Cool, we're all agreed. Let's get into it. Clarifying the outcomes and stating them at the start, and getting buy-in from everyone, as to what the outcomes are, makes a huge difference in terms of engagement and motivation, and people feeling validated and respected around the interaction that you're having with them.
Yeah, and I think for teams as well, it also gets everyone on the same page, goes a long way to that as well, that they know they've agreed, they've given their input, and then everyone can move forward together.
Yes.
So one of the things I was keen to ask you with is around leadership, and I know that your podcast is called Evolve Leadership. That you've done a lot of thinking and do a lot of work in this space. I feel like leadership is one of these things that it doesn't really matter so much whether you're a business owner, a formal like a manager in a team necessarily, or a person inside a team. That leadership, I think, is such a critical competency for pretty much anybody. What you've mentioned a handful of things there already, but what do you think are the key things that do make a good leader?
So you mentioned the podcast that is about to launch, and maybe by the time listeners are hearing this, it will be up there. If it's not, keep your eye on the website, McDermott Coaching, because it will be there shortly if it's not there already. For me, I now use the language of the evolved leader, which is the name of my podcast, the Evolved Leadership Podcast, and that's a new language that I've come to. But I've been living and working with clients around the principles that what I mean by the evolved leader for a very long time. And what to me is evolved leadership, a leader who is demonstrating an evolved way of leading, is someone who fundamentally not only focuses on making a good profit in their business or organization, but equally, or even more so, focuses on the contribution that the organization is making to the planet, the way that they're uplifting humanity in some way. And not only the organizational purpose, but the individual performance of the leader, how they contribute to that as an individual. And they are linked, but they are two different areas. There's the organization, which is a huge, if it's a large one, a huge body of people all coming and contributing in their own way, that ultimately leads to an energy output that impacts the planet in so many ways, as well as the individual leader, that's one person, and if they're in senior leadership, their impact on the organization is very significant, and both are really important in my view to consider as a leader. How do I prioritize, and how do I represent uplifting humanity or contributing to the planet positively in some way, and aligning that with performing highly in my role, or as a business owner, ensuring my business, as the leader of the business, that I'm clearly impacting the planet in a positive way. As well as for the organization, how is the organization in a measurable and results focused way actually uplifting people, and measuring the impact of that. And there are countless examples of that. So that's number one. And it might be donation based. There are many businesses that aren't necessarily directly doing frontline amazing work that helps disadvantaged people, and it doesn't have to be work around disadvantaged people, but they might donate to charities that that are doing frontline work that very significantly help people. And one of my clients, they do run a foundation that donates money to third world countries. They have a business, and their business allows them to donate, a significant amount of money per year through a foundation they've established to particularly single women in third world countries to break free of a poverty cycle. But there are so many other ways. I mean, marine conservation, microfinance is one. Sustainable energy. You name it. There are infinite ways that people can help the planet. So that's number one in terms of evolved leadership. And I know we only have a certain amount of time, but the others that I really take a stand for are that a leader understands how to motivate their people and is also a highly motivated person themselves. And that's an art. It's a skill. And I'll give the first secret. It involves knowing why people are doing helping people to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And as I said, a lot of people don't. And running an organization where the purpose of that organization is clear and it's inspiring to the people that work there, and ensuring that what people are interested in personally in terms of their objectives is at least fairly aligned. It doesn't have to be perfect, but fairly aligned with what the purpose of the organization is and the organizational objectives. And when there's that alignment, you'll get motivated teams and high quality people wanting to work for the organization. And probably, I'll just say one more quality though. There are other aspects, but emotional intelligence. And this was made famous as a term by Daniel Goleman, who's a well-known Harvard Business Review writer. And this is a huge world, which we don't have time to go into. But for an evolved leader, they absolutely need to be cultivating emotional intelligence, which involves self-awareness, self-mastery, social friendliness is one of the terms Daniel Goleman uses, and a number of other qualities. And there are a couple more things, but I know we're short on time, so maybe I'll just leave that there.
I think it's certainly a challenge because everybody's different and motivated by different things, but motivated in different ways, I find as well. So I know with our team that everyone's a little bit different. For a long time, it's easy that I had been sort of the thinking that people are motivated by some of the same things that I am, but it was only when we started actually asking the team and saying, hey, okay, what do you want to do and why is that important to you, that sometimes the insights were like significantly different to what you would necessarily expect. So I think it's so easy that you just in your way of thinking and you think that other people think like you, but they don't.
No,
at least not like me. I'm pretty sure that applies.
No, it's a level of it's a level to decide whether you want to play at that level or not. And some people do, and some people don't. And you've got to decide where do you want to play.
I love that though. In that, I think that sometimes again, like it's obviously people need motivation, and that's important, but finding good for leaders, making sure that the people are motivated to begin with, I think is a starting point. Because I know I've had some frustrating team members in the past where they're just not motivated, and it's just probably not the right fit. But again, it's hard to know until you know.
Absolutely, it's one of the more challenging aspects of business leadership is getting the right people on the ship, which is the number one thing to ideally take place before you really get sailing with your organization. If you're already sailing, it's okay, but then there are strategies to still go through the process of getting the right people on the ship, which may mean some of the crew leaving the ship and getting others to replace them if they weren't the right people for the ship. That if they're not the right people, there's another ship which is the right ship for them, and it might not be your one. No, it's the number one thing to focus on as a business owner before you set sail. Really just focusing on running the business.
I think in being aware as well that like businesses grow and change as well. So sometimes people they join a business at a time and they're the right people at that time. But sometimes if the business grows and they don't grow with the business, or the business grows in a different way to the way that they want to grow, that it just means that it's not no longer the right fit as well. And I think recognizing that's probably a good thing on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are you focused on at the moment, Dave? What's coming up for you?
Well, the big one is the Evolve Leadership podcast. So that's what I'm working nights on at the moment to, get as you would know, getting all the different pieces in place to actually launch. And hopefully by the time listeners are listening to this, it'll be up there. If not, it will be there soon. Yeah, but that has been, a big journey for me to get to the point where I'm launching this as a project. And the podcast is one aspect of the Evolve Leadership project, which is a project I've embarked on to do 100 interviews with business owners and executives who make the world a better place. And out of that, as the interviews start to, clearly show patterns and insights and trends that, are starting to be very, very repeating themes, that's when I'll then start to write my first book around evolved leadership and probably the first of a number of books. So it's a project that that is now well underway and probably will be my number one project, I'd say, for many years to come, in addition to my coaching practice.
Next to the veggie patch, you mean?
Next to the veggie patch. That's another big project in my outside of work life, the sustainable lifestyle on our property. Absolutely.
Awesome, mate. Well, Dave, thank you so much for sharing your insights. For people that are keen to learn more about what you do and what you're about, what's the best way for them to learn?
So just go to my website, mcdermottcoaching.com.au. McDermott has 2 T's, and there you can get in touch through our contact form, and they're all, the podcast will be there very soon, probably already there by now, and by the time that listeners hear this, as well as a bunch of articles and description of our offerings. So that'd be the way to go.
Awesome. Well, we'll pop a link into the show notes as well for anyone that wants easy access. But Dave, thanks again, mate. I look forward to following that journey, and again, really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Thanks, Ben. It's been a real pleasure.